To get started, head to the Arch Linux download page and grab the latest ISO image, link in the description. With the ISO image at hand, create a bootable CD or USB, then plug it into your system CD or USB drive. After the CD or USB boots up, you will be presented with the first Arch Linux GRUB installer options. Here, select the first option and press the Enter key to continue. This will be followed by boot messages on your screen. After the installer decompresses and loads the Linux kernel, you will be automatically thrown to an Arch Linux Bash terminal with root privileges. A good place to start is to check the IP configuration of your network interfaces and see whether you have internet connectivity. The output indicates that the active interface, EMP0S3, has an IPv4 address of 10.0.2.15. This will be different in your case depending on your LAN's IP addressing scheme. To check internet connectivity, ping Google's DNS. In addition, you can list the partition block allocation information. Also, you can view the hard disk naming format. If you are using ISCSI, NVMe, or SSD drives, the convention will take the format /dev/sd. In this case, we have a single hard disk represented by the format /dev/sda. You can run the lsblk command to list all the block volumes CDs attached to the system in a tree-like format. To get comprehensive information about the hard disk, run the fdisk command. The hard disks can have other names than SDX, such as XVDA, VDA, etc. In my case, I have /dev/sda. Now let's start creating a disk layout partition table by running the cfdisk command. Once you run the command, you will be prompted to select the label type. Select GPT. Then free space and hit on New from the bottom menu. Type the partition size in MB, 500M, and press Enter key. Select Type from the bottom menu, and choose EFI System Partition Type. You've finished configuring the EFI system partition. Next, let's create the swap partition using the same procedure. Use the down arrow key and select again the remaining free space. Select New, then the recommended partition size is 2 times RAM size, but you can safely use 1G. Next, select the type option and hit Enter. Then select the Linux swap option. Finally, for root partition, once again, select the new option. Specify the size. Here we will use the remaining free space, which, in our case, is 41.5 G. Next, select the type option. And select Linux file system. Next, select the right option to save the changes and hit Enter. Finally, select the Quit option to exit the disk management console. For now, your partition table has been written to HDD-GPT, but no file system has been created on top of it. You can also review the partition table summary by running the fdisk command. Now, it's time to format the partitions with the required file systems. Issue the following commands to create a FAT32 file system for the EFI system partition, to create the extension 4 file system for the root partition, and create the swap partition 4/dev/sda2. To install Arch Linux, the root partition must be mounted to the /mnt directory and mount point to be accessible. Also, the swap partition needs to be initialized. Next, install the base system using the following command. If you got this errors, just run this commands. Then try to install the base system again. Once installed, you can confirm that all the major directories required in a Linux file system are present by listing the contents of the /mnt directory. Next, generate the fstab file for your new Arch Linux system by issuing the following command. Subsequently, inspect the fstab file content by running this command. Next, to further configure Arch Linux, you must crud into /m into the system path and add a hostname for your system by issuing this commands. Next, configure your system language. If you got this errors, just run this command. Try to configure your system language again. If you got this errors, just run this command. Try to configure your system language again. Choose and uncomment your preferred encoding languages from /etc/locale.gen file. Specify your preferred locale settings by uncommenting them. Then save and exit the file. Generate your system language layout. Define and export the lang environment variable. Next, configure the time zone. The time zones are stored in the /usr/share/zone-info directory. Configure your system time zone by creating a symlink for your subtime zone to /etc/local time file path. Run the date command to confirm your time corresponds to the set time zone. You should also configure the hardware clock to use UTC. Like many famous Linux distributions, Arch Linux uses repo mirrors for different world locations and multiple system architectures. The standard repositories are enabled by default, but if you want to activate multi-lib repositories, you must uncomment multi-lib directives from /etc/pacman.conf file. Then save and exit the file. After the repository file has been edited, synchronize and update database mirrors and packages by running this command. Next, set up a password for the root account and create a new user with sudo privileges in the Arch box by issuing this commands. Also, expire the user password to force the new user to change the password at first login. After the new user has been added, you need to install the sudo package and update the wheel group line from /etc/sudoers file to grant root privileges to the newly added user. Be sure to install the Vim text editor and sudo package first. Next, run vsudo to edit the sudoers file. Add this line to group wheel. Save and exit the file. Next, install the DHCP server and enable it to start on boot time. In the last step, install the bootloader for Arch to boot up after restart. The default bootloader for Linux distributions in Arch Linux also is represented by the grub package. To install the grub bootloader in UEFI machines on the first hard disk, run this command. Next, create the EFI subdirectory in the /boot directory to mount the EFI partition, which is /dev/sda1 as we saw earlier. Now mount the EFI partition. Run the command shown to configure the bootloader file. Finally, create the grub configuration file by issuing the following command. Arch Linux is now installed and configured for your box. The last steps needed are to exit the CRUD environment, unmount the partitions, and reboot the system by issuing these commands. After reboot, remove the installation media image and the system will boot directly into the grub menu as shown in the screen. After reboot, log in using the regular user you created. You will be prompted to change the password before proceeding any further.